My name is Sana Hashemi, and I am a 21-year-old SoCal native studying kinesiology, like she mentioned, with an emphasis in biomechanics. I am also the eldest daughter of an Afghan household of 4 brothers and 1 sister. And when I say 4 brothers, 1 brother back with our Creator, Alhamdulillah. I've come here today extremely vulnerable to talk to you all about grief in our community. So what exactly is grief? According to the Oxford Dictionary, grief means deep sorrow, especially that caused by someone's death. Despite the term grief not being coined for death, we tend to only associate it with death. I feel like we fail to realize that grief is more than just the loss of someone. Whether grief is the loss of a loved one, the loss of our country, the loss of opportunity, the loss of a relationship, or even the loss of hope. Grief is grief, and it's honestly the most undescribable feeling in the world. You truly can't describe grief until you've begun to grieve yourself, and even then, it'll leave you completely speechless. 1 year ago, on June 20th, in Afghanistan, my world came crashing down as my 15-year-old brother laid lifeless in my lap in the backseat of a taxi in Kunar, Afghanistan. Sorry. As I stared into his beautiful eyes one last time, not once did it dawn on me that this was going to be the easy part. And dare I say, the easiest part of what was about to be the biggest roller coaster of my life. I remember when my brother first passed away, the first piece of advice that I was given was that there's going to be both good days and bad days. I'm here to tell you guys, that's absolute bullshit. So let me rephrase it for you guys. There'll be bearable days, and then there's going to be unbearable days. That's just how grief works. It'll never leave you, but some days, if you're lucky, it won't knock you off your feet. If you had asked me before it had happened, I would have told you what grief was. It was denial. It was anger. It was bargaining. It was depression. And finally, it was acceptance. I would have told you that there was no way but through. I would have been the first to preach to you that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I mean, who do you think held their cousin's hand when her father passed away? There was absolutely no way I wasn't going to recognize grief when it came. Had the time ever come, I knew what it was going to be. But grief didn't come with a warning. It grabbed me at what felt like my highest and sunk me so down low. I didn't know or recognize who I had become, let alone what had happened to me. I didn't recognize the lifeless people that I called Moroplar, or mom and dad. What were we, and what happened to us? What had we become? It was like having that type of nightmare where you feel like everything is moving in slow motion except for your brain, stuck between begging to forget what happened and just praying that you never do. This is grief. It was and still is so hard trying to get back to my normal activities without having a mental block 24/7. Believe me, I've thought long and hard about how I'd put into words what happened. And each time I begin to think, my brain freezes, and I begin to hyperventilate, totally unaware of which direction to run and what words to string together. There was no easy way for me to describe my pain and grief. How was I supposed to explain that my brother had passed away in my arms? How was I supposed to get over this guilt? How was I supposed to recall the most traumatic moment of my life? How was I supposed to mouth the words that made it real? In other words, I forgot how to exist. I was so tired. I was tired of grief being my whole personality, but I couldn't stop. It was all I felt, and it's honestly all I still do feel 24/7. When I was happy, deep down I was sad. When I was mad, I felt empty. And when I was sad, I became numb. It felt like there was no pain or no end to my pain, and I was tired of trying to regain my sanity. I had tried it all. I listened to my therapist when she said that I should take initiative to eliminate all the stressors of my life. I listened to my doctor when he advised that Zoloft would at least help me stop feeling the pain. I listened to those wellness Instagram coaches when they said that the key to happiness was just to reprogram my brain to only have positive thoughts. Desperate for relief, I just wanted to be freed of the shackles of heartbreak. I became so tired of being mad when people would talk about my brother Ridwan because they didn't truly feel my pain. I was tired of people saying that they missed him because they didn't miss him the way that I missed him. I was tired of people telling me that I needed to be stronger when this was me at my strongest. I was tired of people telling me what to feel and how to feel. Sorry. The fear that would swallow me whole when I would see my mother crying every evening made me feel like the worst child in the world. But I knew that was the only way I knew how to protect myself. I had become extremely selfish. I knew that the moment I crouched down on the Jai Namaz where she would pour her pain out to God, that I wouldn't be wiping her tears, but instead she would have to witness the heartbreak of her child, while only hurting her more. With a heavy heart and tears that filled my eyes, I'd keep my head down and walk away. I knew I couldn't heal her broken heart by showing her mine. I knew better than anyone else that I couldn't pour from an empty cup. But when you feel like the responsibility of the world is on your shoulders, it almost feels impossible. It's hard not trying to break down every 5 minutes. As you guys can tell. It's hard to try to act like your grief isn't eating you alive. It's hard to try and enjoy the new experiences of life because you're so busy trying to process what happened. It was hard trying to move forward when you kept just being pulled back. But amid this pain and this vulnerability, one thing became clear. Our community has become so tranquil and so passive with the idea of grief that we've forgotten how to properly go about it. We've dismissed this idea of mental health being a crucial part of our existence, and with years and years of invalidating our feelings, we've done nothing but cause more trauma that has unfortunately only been passed down from generation to generation. Just this past August, we as a diaspora watched our country be taken over right before our eyes. That gut-wrenching feeling that we all had watching our country fall into the hands of the Taliban, that's a form of grief. That feeling of deep sorrow, that feeling of deep-rooted trauma that has been passed down from generation to generation. The feeling of watching our country fall, that's grief. I'll never forget the day that someone asked me how I could paint my nails before my brother's 40 days had been completed. Little did she know, that was the only thing that was keeping me sane. That was the only thing that had me sitting in front of them, nodding my head and being present. It was then that I realized that our community has become so fixated on certain things passed down from generation to generation that have done absolutely nothing to heal our community, yet for some reason hold a lot of importance. We as a community have failed one another by invalidating our own emotions. Living in a fast-paced world, in a fast-paced community, sometimes we forget to just step back and check in with ourselves. How are we doing? Not only physically, but mentally, and most importantly, emotionally. Mental health heavily, and I mean heavily, influences the quality of life. So it makes sense that mental health, just like physical health, it needs to be taken care of and maintained. One way it can be maintained is through finding a sense of belonging within your community. As Afghan Americans, what do you think happens at the intersection of mental health and one's experience as a member of the Afghan community? This shared cultural experience as a diaspora, found through family connections, values, expressions through spirituality or music, reliance on community members, religious networks. These can all be great sources of strength and support that can help maintain mental health within our community. The stigma of mental health isn't new to the Afghan community. Some of our parents and elders have gone through severe, and I mean severe, mental health struggles through periods of their life that they continue to refuse to accept, let alone seek treatment for. Unfortunately, that scenario continues to be common today, with Afghans not seeking mental health care because of stigma. We can all work together to recognize and address this stigma, but in order to do so, we must understand where it comes from and why it's so ingrained into our culture and into our community. I've always firmly believed that change comes from within. And my experiences, they only confirm that. Until we can really validate our own feelings and struggles and pain, it'll be hard for us to move forward as a functioning community. So as I stand before you all here today, in my most vulnerable state, I'm here to tell you that I can guarantee you guys that there's no playbook for grief. There's ups, there's downs, and you know what? From time to time, it'll even shake you left to right. Grief has no compass, has no direction, and it'll get you when you're least expecting it. Stigma is an evil, self-sabotaging roadblock that makes people feel ashamed of the struggle that they're going through every day. It makes them afraid to seek help when they need it most. And until you learn to validate your own emotions and understand that your mental health plays a crucial part in your day-to-day life, it'll be extremely difficult to grow as a person, let alone as a society. Believe me, I tried it all. I did it all, I tried. But until I truly allowed myself to feel and validate my own sorrow and pain, there wasn't moving forward, let alone healing. And with all that being said, it's still a journey trying to heal. Despite being up here in front of you all today, I'm not there yet. Will I be there in the next year, next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? I don't know, because I'm not there yet. There's no success story in which I can tell you what works. It's just about waking up each morning and choosing to strive towards a better version of myself. Does it work every day? Absolutely not. But I try my best not to let that deter any of the work I've done thus far. I have yet to figure out how to rediscover myself with my given circumstances. But with all of that being said, I want to emphasize the importance of taking care of our mental health with you guys here today. Whether it's through seeking professional help or just allowing yourself to feel and validating your own emotions, I urge you all to step back and check in with yourselves mentally. You can't pour from an empty cup. It's time we break that stigma around seeking help in regards to mental health. Grief can be one of the loneliest things in the world. Despite being surrounded by your loved ones, it feels like it's just you against the world. So I want y'all to know that if you're ever going through something, whether it's grief, depression, anxiety, PTSD, you're not alone. You were never alone, and you're never going to be alone. You're always going to have a community behind you. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of vulnerability to show you that there are people out there for you. Hand in hand, I firmly believe that we can break the stigma. But until then, all I can do is stand here in my most vulnerable state and remind you guys that you're never going to be alone. Thank you.